paraquat murderer. During the early 1980s in Japan, if you stopped for a drink from a vending machine, you risked ingesting poison instead of soda. This was due to the paraquat murderer, a sinister madman who left poisoned drinks in vending machines across the country. Unsuspecting individuals would grab a drink, take a sip, and tragically, that sip often marked the beginning of the end. The most horrifying aspect of his crimes was his use of paraquat, a highly toxic herbicide meant for killing weeds. When humans ingested it, it caused a painful and gruesome death, leading to respiratory failure as the lungs filled with fluid. Vending machines were as ubiquitous in Japan as sushi and samurai, making them the perfect venues for his twisted plan. He succeeded in killing at least 12 people and severely injuring the internal organs of 35 others. Despite widespread panic and an intense police investigation, the paraquat murderer was never caught. The case remains unsolved, adding to the unease. His choice not to target a specific group made his attacks very random and elusive, meaning anyone could have fallen victim to his poison-laced drinks. Santa Rosa Hitchhiker. If you thought hitchhiking in Santa Rosa, California during the early 1970s was just about catching a free ride, think again. It was less about adventure and more like playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek, where the killer was the only one hiding and the seeking never ended well. Between 1972 and 1973, a series of gruesome murders shocked this quiet town. The victims, mostly young women, had been hitchhiking to get from one place to another, but instead met a tragic end. At least 7 women's bodies were discovered dumped in rural areas around Santa Rosa, often in ravines or ditches, as if the killer was trying to hide his crimes under dirt and leaves. The victims ranged in age from 12 to 23 and all shared one common trait. They were last seen hitchhiking before they disappeared. The exact details of how the killer subdued and murdered his victims remain unclear. But the bodies showed signs of physical trauma, and some were found or partially clothed, suggesting a possible sexual motive. By the time the bodies were found, crucial evidence had been lost, witnesses were scarce, and the remote locations where the bodies were dumped made it difficult to gather any physical evidence. The Butcher of Mons. In the late 1990s, in the small Belgian town of Mons, the brutality and disturbing surgical skill of a particular serial killer made his crimes shockingly grim. The dismembered body parts of several women were discovered scattered in garbage bags across the region. Some remains were dumped in rivers, others left by roadsides, all left like sinister breadcrumbs leading nowhere. The victims, 5 women in total, were all brutally dismembered after death, earning the unknown assailant the chilling nickname, the Butcher of Mons. This killer displayed a level of precision that suggested he was no with a sudden grudge. He knew exactly what he was doing. He took his time and treated the dismembering as if it were a macabre art project, DIY, with a terrifying twist. He would abduct his victims, perform heinous acts, and after their death, meticulously cut them up into pieces to dispose of in trash bags around town. Despite the best efforts of the Belgian police, the case was never solved, and the evil killer was never caught. He left no fingerprints, DNA, and, most crucially, no witnesses. It was like he was a ghost, leaving only terror and confusion in his wake. Bible John. In the late 1960s, the streets of Glasgow became the dark pulpit for a sinister killer known as Bible John. Between 1968 and 1969, while Glasgow grooved to jazz and jive tunes, this madman unleashed terror. He specifically targeted women at the Barrowland Ballroom during its infamous dance nights. After some dancing and likely unsettling conversations about the Bible John would offer to walk the women home. But the show of chivalry was deceptive and deadly, as his victims soon found themselves strangled with their stocking. All three women, Patricia Docker, Jemima MacDonald, and Helen Puddock, were found murdered in various parts of Glasgow, bearing the grim signature of strangulation. Additionally, there were signs of sexual assault. One chilling detail emerged from Helen Puddock's case. Her sister Jean shared a taxi with her and Bible John on the night of Helen's murder. Jean remembered that the man called himself John and quoted the Bible extensively, complaining about dance halls being dens of iniquity, a stark contrast to his actions. The police launched one of the most extensive manhunts in Scottish history, with over 100 detectives assigned and more than 50,000 witness statements collected. They created a composite sketch based on Jean's description, which became infamous across Scotland. Despite these efforts, the killer was never caught, leading some to speculate that he might have left town.